right, my friends. Thanks for joining me today. J.R. Dukes at your service. I want to extend a warm, heartfelt welcome to all my free-minded friends out there. I got a very special show for each and every one of you today. I want to make sure before we get started that we are live on each and every platform. Okay, we are broadcasting live with Facebook. Looking good. Hello to everybody on Facebook. YouTube, of course, is coming in loud and clear. I hope everybody can hear me. If there are any questions, concern, or issues, please put them in the comments below. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Let me know where you're from. Where in the world are you? Hello to everyone on Twitch. And finally, hello to I guess it's called X now. No longer can we use Twitter. I have a great subject for us to go over, and I have a very special guest for each and every one of us. So, real quickly, I got to say hello to Zach from Southwest Pennsylvania. Zach, it's always a pleasure having you, my friend, back in the chat. I know it's been a little while since I've taken time to actually do a live stream, but we'll get into that another day. I'm glad to be with each and every one of you right now. All right, so quickly here, we are talking about, we like to talk about a lot of things on this show, right? Generally, I try to talk to you about indoctrination, political events, basically how you can live your best life possible by understanding the world that we live in and fighting the indoctrination that we're all surrounded with each and every day. So today we're going to be talking about the Israel-Gaza conflict that you are probably aware about. It's all over the news, and you are probably aware of all of this craziness going on these campuses. There are college campuses and universities all over the United States. There are just a lot of young adults out there that are simply misled. They are not understanding the truth pertaining to Israel and Gaza. Even my own family, to be perfectly honest with you, have had issues with this, and I've had to straighten them out in my own way, if you know what I'm saying. Kind of interject a family discussion. And I think that's what we need to have today is a family discussion. And that's what we're going to have today. So what we have is a very special guest. I have a lady that we're going to introduce to you right now. Let me go ahead and put her on screen. I want each and every one of you to say hello to my new friend, Donna. Hello, Donna. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
It's a blessing to have you with us today. And I was just starting to introduce you. You are talking to me from Texas, right? Houston, Texas, or Dallas, Houston? Okay, fantastic. And we're just going to take a few minutes and get a little background information, just have a little meet and greet so we know exactly what is going on with you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, if you would, and basically let us know the area that you're living in, what you do for a living, and what is unique about Donna.
Absolutely. So my name is Donna. I'm 28 years old. I live in Houston, Texas right now, but I did grow up in California. I am a first-generation American. My whole family is Israeli. My parents moved here in the 90s. I currently have very strong ties to the conflict. All of my extended family lives in Israel. So I have a lot to say on this topic. Currently, I have a family member who is a hostage. So just, here to raise awareness, here to spread the word and hopefully try to educate. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Donna, thank you. I want to extend from me personally and on behalf of all of our viewers that we are sympathetic and we are definitely going to be praying for you and your family in the hopes that your cousin can be released safely and hopefully quickly. I know this has to be a very stressful time on you and your family. And the bottom line is our prayers are with you at this time. Now, my understanding is the purpose of you being here today is you want to essentially explain to our viewers what is going on in this conflict from the perspective of a Jewish woman, a person that has lived in Israel, a person that is Jewish. Is that a good way to summarize it up? Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. Now, why don't we start and let me see if I can bring up a picture and this is your cousin, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me see what I can do. There we are. All right, here is your cousin. Can you see her on your screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right, go ahead. And what is your cousin's name?
Her name is Agam Berger.
Okay.
She's 19 years old, and she's from Israel.
All right, and you sent me a video, I believe, that had a story and some tags pertaining to her situation. Let me see if I can pull this up so we can take a quick peek at this here. All right, I know there was different stories and whatnot, and here's an article that I found in the New York Post pertaining to your cousin. Here we go. All righty. All right. Again, this is New York Post. This was back in January. Israeli hostage 19 appears wounded in Hamas video with blood on her face as her dad fears the worst. And of course, I'm assuming this is her father.
Yes.
Okay. And let's see if we can hear what he is saying in this particular video.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid. No negotiations. My daughter is 90 days, more than 90 days under the ground. No oxygen, no food. If someone will take care of her, she's wounded. All the girls. What will happen? This is my emotion. I don't know what happened. I don't know what to think. I don't want to think what happened on what is getting over on her because I will get crazy. I think the video is a brutal thing because I don't know what was Hamas or means when he put this video out, but we saw the pictures. We saw my daughter, Agam. I saw wounds. I saw her face. We saw all the girls on their face, what have been through on them.
Don, I wanted to ask you back on this video here. Is this your cousin right here? I couldn't really tell from the video. Is this her right here?
She is the one in the middle with the brown sweater.
Okay, she's in the middle with the brown sweater.
Because
let's see.
I
here.
don't know what was.
Is this her right here? Okay. All right. It's hard to tell when they're in this shape. Obviously, she's been brutalized. I mean, it's a tragic situation here, and I just don't think it's talked about enough. And of course, that's the reason that we're talking with you right now. Let me see. Let me stop sharing this particular screen here. Okay. So go ahead and tell us the story of what happened. Who is your cousin and what happened to her, I'm assuming, on October 7th last year?
Right. So because the country of Israel is so small and there are a lot of, kind of enemies surrounding it, it is a requirement for everybody when they graduate high school to go straight into the IDF for 2 years.
And just so our viewers understand, the IDF is the Israeli military, right? It's service in the Israeli military, aka the IDF, is mandatory, mainly because Israel is always having to defend itself and it has a limited population, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So in the event that something like this were to happen, they have people who are ready to defend the country.
Right.
So in her case, she had just finished her military training. She was a week out, so she was newly an IDF soldier. She was on base on October 7th, and there is an alarm that goes around countrywide so people know there's an attack taking place. She heard the alarm. It was considered the Sabbath in Israel, which means people don't use technology, people don't turn on lights. There's a lot of rules around the Sabbath of, lack of communication. So that definitely played a role in this war, or, specifically in that first day. But she heard the alarm. She went running. She was one of the first responders because she was one of the newer soldiers. And when she did go to the base, there were Hamas terrorists waiting for her and for everybody else who came. So her and 3 other girls were pretty brutally beaten, as you can see from the video, and dragged into a van and taken straight to Gaza. They don't know exactly where she's at now. They have not heard from her in quite some time. There was a little bit of communication a few months back during the first hostage deal. She passed on a message to another girl she met in the situation that was released in that hostage deal to make sure she calls her father to wish him a happy birthday. So she'd been keeping track of the dates, and she wrote his number on a styrofoam cup and gave it to her, asked her to please make sure she reaches out. There was a viral video of the woman calling her dad and telling him, she wanted to make sure that I wish you a happy birthday on your birthday. And she wanted you guys to know, don't worry about her. She's fine. She's strong. She's resilient, and she's going to be okay. And she'll see you guys soon. So that in itself, in my opinion, just shows the resiliency that is just innate within her and all the hostages right now. We're just praying for her return. That's the last they heard from her. But I know that was really special for them. So definitely we're just waiting, crossing fingers.
Sure. And obviously she sounds like a very mature, tough woman, even at 19 years of age. I wanted to point out too for our viewers that when you are in the IDF and you're taken a hostage, you're considered a more valuable hostage, I guess is the way to say it, in the sense that you are a military combatant, you're in the military, and they generally value those hostages more. Am I correct in that? Okay. So that's probably one of the reasons she hasn't been released yet. In addition to that, can you talk about why it is so peerless for women specifically to be in this type of situation?
Well, I mean, there was that New York Post article. I mean, people know at this point, hopefully, that there's a lot of sexual assault happening. There are a lot of rapes happening. So it's definitely a very dark time. Women are definitely more in danger as hostages. There have been stories from hostages that have been released, very, tragic stories about these sorts of situations. So definitely, we can only pray. I don't know exactly what she's going through, but I'm going to assume based off what I've seen that it's probably pretty dark. So
I can imagine from the videos, and I'm only getting into this because I want to keep it PG, but I want to paint a vivid picture for our viewers because I think it's important that we talk about these type of things because we have all these young kids essentially marching around these campuses acting like they are trying to defend people that are civilians and babies. And listen, I as for you do, I don't want to see any type of innocence harmed or a child, much less be harmed. But at the same time, it's important that the world knows exactly what happened to Israel and exactly what happened to the people that were at this music festival, and exactly what is continuing to happen to these individuals. And clearly these hostages have been brutalized. They have been assaulted. Some of them are sick in a weakened condition. And obviously, just because of anatomy reasons, a female is much more problematic because of sexual type of crimes. And I think the UN and other agencies have done their best to try to minimize and undermine these war crimes. I mean, there are actual rules pertaining to war. And this is definitely a violation of everything that has ever been agreed from Geneva Conventions all the way down. Am I correct, or how do you see it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there are so many war crimes happening. Just that is the biggest one, in my opinion. But even as simple as operating out of hospitals in Gaza and, militants that are dressed as civilians that are just trying to blend in. Like all of those are war crimes, and they're happening on a daily basis right now. And I just think there's a lot of misinformation being spread.
I've had a couple people too in the chat just to address it. Your name on the screen is, we would say it in America as Dana, but it's a Hebrew name, as you were explaining to me, and it's pronounced Donna. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just want to kind of clarify that. Now, tell us, let's go back to last year, October 7th. We're going to just clarify a few things. Your cousin started in the IDF the day before October 7th, which of course is the day of this terrible tragedy that Israel suffered, but she just joined the IDF the day before. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then fast forward to the very next day, October 7th, she was attending the music festival, or she was a first responder responding to a call for help pertaining to this attack?
She was a first responder. So when she heard the alarm, she was one of the people that was rushed over there to try to help. And that's when they were waiting for them.
Now, we hear this word a lot, something along the lines of this Kabul. What is the word that we hear a lot pertaining? It basically means a town in Israel. What do we call these? Kibbutz, right. Yes. Say it one more time for me. I'll make sure I say it right. Kibbutz?
Kibbutz.
Kibbutz. Okay, kibbutz. All right. I just want to make sure, again, we're focusing on the American audience here because I think it's important they understand the plight Israel is in. Essentially, you had this town, this kibbutz, excuse me if I'm still butchered here, was attacked. We've seen video footage of this where effectively these terrorists came in with these paragliders, motorcycles, bikes, whatever, and they just slaughtered all of these people. Can you talk a little bit about the atrocities that happened on October 7th?
Right. So a kibbutz in general, I think it's important to explain, is really just a village of people who work and live within a village and work with each other as a community. If anything, they're the biggest example of what peace is in Israel than any other community. So it's a little bit ironic, but they did come into the kibbutz and they basically went through houses. They murdered people in cold blood. There were horrifying scenes that came out. They burned people alive. There were pictures of people that you can see their charred bodies just hugging each other and they're completely burned to death. There was also a family that one of the hostages that was released witnessed them putting her baby in an oven.
Let me pause 1 second. I hate to interrupt you. I just want to give just a service announcement, a public disclosure. If you have any children with you or any minors, you might not want to allow them to continue to hear this particular video. Some of the subject matter in here is of a graphic and extremely sensitive nature. So I just want to give that warning on the front end. Donna, I apologize. Go ahead and continue.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there was a baby burned in an oven. There was also many pictures that came out of beheaded babies. The craziest part of that is when people were talking about it, other people said, without proof, we don't believe you. We need proof. So myself and probably a lot of Israelis, a lot of Jews saw pictures that we probably shouldn't have seen that are just, etched into our brain that are never leaving. So those pictures were circulating for a while. There were just really horrible scenes. There's children's rooms that they went into. You can just see blood all over their stuffed animals, just horrifying scenes. And the number, it took 30 days to identify the bodies because some were so badly burned they didn't even have fingerprints.
So, I've heard stories of individuals that were, I think in the United States, we would know them as panic rooms. Basically, in Israel, they're more or less bomb shelters because Israel, before this time, has basically been bombed continuously. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely correct. Every building is required to have a bomb shelter. And if they don't, they have to have a bomb shelter within a quarter mile. That's a law in Israel when they're building buildings. So that's something that happens because of how often they are attacked.
All right. So I think that's an important point to make sure we drill down on just for a second here. Mm-hmm. It is such a problem in Israel that the Hamas, these terrorists that live right next to them in this so-called Gaza Strip, mm-hmm. they literally are firing rockets daily, firing munitions of whatever sort into Israel just randomly. And mm-hmm. it is such a bad situation that the government of Israel has mandated by law that each and every home has to be retrofitted with a bomb shelter effectively, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now the problem with the bomb shelter is that it's built for bombs.
Right.
When individuals would run into these shelters for protection, they may not necessarily lock. They may not necessarily propel like a home invader. And definitely they're not fireproof. And by that, I mean, there were many times where they couldn't get into the panic room or they weren't sure if somebody was hiding. We'll just go ahead and call it a bomb shelter, whatever term we use. Effectively, what was going on, they were burning these structures to the ground, and anybody that left the building, they just simply shot them.
Right.
Is that your understanding? Is there anything you could add to that? Is that pretty well it?
Yeah, there were also some bomb shelters that they simply just threw a grenade into and everybody blew up. So there were 2 survivors in one of the bomb shelters where that happened. They were actually a couple, and they basically played dead under a ton of dead bodies, but both of them had their arms blown off from the grenade. And they were the only 2 survivors in that room of probably about 30 to 40 people.
And they still have that one young man that actually had his arm blown off, and he's still a hostage. I forgot his name, yes. But he is in the custody of Hamas at this time. Right. The back inside this kibbutz, You had all these terrible crimes going on. You were mentioning even what they were doing to pregnant women about removing babies from them, putting them in the oven. Is this not reminiscent of the Holocaust?
Absolutely. And everything we're seeing in the US, all of the protests and all of the propaganda and all of the hatred toward Jews in the US is so reminiscent of pre Holocaust Europe. So it's a little scary that it seems to be spreading over here as well. But it is incredibly reminiscent of the Holocaust, and that's why this is such a big deal to Israel for them to be responding the way they are, because this is the first event of this kind of, like, to this degree, that this many people were killed in such horrible, torturous ways. That brings us right back to where we were before Israel became a country.
It just shocks the conscience, all of these crimes. I don't think the mainstream, what I call the legacy media, the vast majority of the coverage, I simply think they don't cover these type of stories. They just will not put this information out for whatever reason. I have my own suspicions as to why they do not put this information out, disseminate it, but it needs to be talked about. As a matter of fact, I believe we were talking about this earlier, you and I in private, but I think it was the CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sanders, if that's her name, the author of the book Lean In. She has made a YouTube video. I believe it's titled something like From Silence to Screams, where she documented these types of crimes that were launched against these Israelis. It's just shocking. And I believe there was another film that was put together that was actually shown to the government in Israel. I believe they call it the Knesset. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I remember the lawmakers were leaving in tears. And it is very smart on the part of the Israeli government to document all this. I'm assuming that they know from the Holocaust that over time people are going to, oh, this never happened. This is exaggerated. This is a big lie. Is that what you think on this?
I do. Well, the documentation actually is coming directly from Hamas. So they were the ones recording, they were the ones sending it out.
That's a good point.
So the reason for that is really just because it's celebrated. People who there's a video that went viral of one of the terrorists that is calling his mom completely, in tears, super excited, talking about how many people he killed, and it's amazing. And she said, you're a blessing, you're a martyr. I'm so proud of you. You're my son. But these videos are being shared just, first of all, I think in order to cause a sort of psychological warfare against Jews that aren't in Israel. So when they see it, it just kind of messes with people who aren't there. They're still kind of starting a war towards us. But at the same time, I think that it's also because they really are proud of these things. Like, these are things they're proud of. So
I saw some video myself of I believe it was near the beginning when this attack was going down. You had these Hamas soldiers or terrorists, whatever you want to call them. They show up at this kibbutz, and you have individuals trying to get in. It's like an electronic gate opening, and they just literally open fire, just shoot them dead in their cars where they're at. I mean, I cannot imagine that happening in America. I guess we can. We had something like that happen on 9/11. Do the people in Israel look at this event, this tragic event, do they look at it the same way as an American looks at 9/11?
Absolutely, yes. This is really Israel's 9/11, 100%. Yes.
And I think I believe if you took the population of Israel and you compared to how many people died in this terrorist attack, it would be something to where I think somebody told me it'd be the equivalent of 20 or 30,000 Americans dying versus the number that died in Israel. Is that your understanding also?
Yes, yeah, that's accurate.
How many deaths were there, if you know, on October 7th?
There were 1,200 deaths on October 7th, but that number is still growing. I mean, they recently found some bodies that they had not been able to find that they assumed were hostages because they didn't hear from them, and they found their bodies at the festival. So that number is continuing to grow. They still don't know the exact number because things are just coming out constantly. And also you have to think about the hostages that we're not sure if they're dead or alive. So that number definitely could be higher.
It's just unbelievable what's going on. And you have these kids going around these colleges taking over these colleges, breaking windows, breaking into buildings, all this violence, all this nonsense. What is it that they're not understanding?
In my opinion, I think people are getting a lot of their news from TikTok, Instagram, these sorts of things that aren't official news sites, where they're just seeing tiny clips with no context. I think that the context is important. People want to say it's not, and I completely disagree. You know, there, for example, when Al Shifa Hospital was bombed, and people kept saying that Israel did it, and Hamas said that Israel did it, and then later they found out that it was a failed missile from Hamas that killed its own people, and nobody corrected it. You know, people just moved on. Okay, that's not news anymore because it's not against Israel. So I feel like people are coming into this with an agenda. They already have their mind made up, and everything that they see, they're just using that, adding to their bank of why they're correct, instead of coming into it with an open mind and asking the right questions of why is this happening? Why are they fighting back? Why aren't they one big state? What's the backstory? Like, people aren't asking those questions, and I think those are really important questions to ask, because there's a lot of misinformation and people are just jumping on a cause because they want a cause.
I think so too. And I think a lot of the information that we're hearing as far as casualties, individuals that have died, this so-called famine that's supposed to be going on, this is information that is coming directly from Hamas. And
Right.
we don't know if the information is correct or if it is false information trying to influence public opinion. What say you?
Absolutely. I mean, these numbers are, in my opinion, completely fabricated, but here's what I say. So it took 30 days for Israel to come up with the number of how many people were killed. 30 days. So it doesn't really make sense logically that Hamas is adding thousands to their numbers every single day. There's no way they can count that many in every single day. But on top of that, they're not differentiating. When they say how many people are dying, let's just say their numbers are correct. They're not differentiating between civilians and combatants. So if you really look at every major war, the average ratio for combatants to civilians that are killed is 1 to 9. Whereas here, even if you go off their numbers, it's 1 to 1.3. So, you know, Israel is doing everything they can to warn people. They're calling apartment complexes, calling people directly to their landlines, saying, hey, we're about to send a missile because we know there's a terrorist over there. We need you to evacuate. And the people who listen are surviving. And the people who say, no, I want to die for my country, I'm a martyr, which basically brings us back to that radicalization and that indoctrination. Those are the people that are dying, unfortunately. It's
Donna,
a really situation.
I think that's a perfect point. I think that is right. I mean, it needs to really be emphasized.
Yeah.
In my mind, I have never heard, to my knowledge, I've never heard of any military force on earth that has ever essentially knocked on a building saying, hello, we're about to blow this building up. Get out now. It's going to be gone in 30 minutes or whatever. And that's exactly what Israel is doing, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're calling people directly. They sent out flyers. They're coming to people door to door, like you said as well. And at the end of the day, you know, we're hearing these buzzwords from the other side, like genocide. I mean, if Israel is actually trying to genocide Palestine, they're doing a really terrible job by warning them first. So, I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous situation when you really look at the facts. I've never heard of a country either that goes in to warn people they're about to bomb, to warn people they're about to send a rocket, knowing they're going for a specific target, and either people refuse to leave or, you know, they leave and they're fine. And those are the people that are surviving. And, you know, the aid is coming in, but it's not getting to the right people. And that's the bottom line. So all of this misinformation is being spread, but it all comes down to what Hamas is allowing.
Well, you brought up several topics we need to drill down on just a little bit. First of all, in relation to the aid that is getting into the Gaza Strip, and for y'all that don't know, the Gaza Strip is just what it sounds like, a little piece of land adjacent to Israel that is surrounded on one side by a wall that Israel had to construct to protect itself, and on the other side is the Mediterranean Sea, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then essentially what you have is they're saying, among other things, there's this big famine. But in reality, tell me about the aid that is coming in from Egypt across their border there, as far as the volume of the aid that is coming in and what the problem is with the aid.
So the aid is coming in not only from Egypt, also from Israel directly, and also from different organizations like the UNRWA and things like that. But they're sending in trucks. They're sending in more trucks and more aid than was ever going in before this war started on a daily basis. So there's hundreds of trucks filled with aid coming through every single day crossing that border. But the problem is that as soon as they cross, Hamas is coming and taking all of that aid, taking all that free aid that's supposed to go to the people that are suffering, taking it either to themselves, to, distributing with their own families and, their people, their other terrorists, or the rest of whatever's left, they're selling in markets for insanely inflated prices. And this is supposed to be free aid. So people who are not able to work right now, obviously, because of everything going on, aren't even able to afford, basic bread and water and eggs, and these things are absolutely ridiculous, but it really does fall on Hamas. And all people are seeing like, oh, there's a famine, but they don't understand the context of that. They don't understand the backstory that Israel is doing everything they can to get the aid to those people. And it's just not possible right now.
So just to make sure our viewers understand this, the number of trucks, aka aid, coming into Israel right now is greater than the amount of aid that was coming in to the Gaza Strip prior to October 7th. Is that not correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And then when that aid actually does come in, you have Hamas, a terrorist group, the ones responsible for this tragedy. They are essentially getting first dibs on all this. They're taking the most valuable resources, the best whatever, and they're keeping it for themselves, and or they're selling it at huge inflated prices. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we're in the process right now of building a dock of some sort to allow the United States and other countries to deliver even more aid. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Right. Okay. And then as this pier, this dock is being built, tell me what's going on with the workers that are building this pier to bring in more aid. Tell the viewers exactly what's happening.
So right now, Hamas is trying to stop that from happening. And so they're actually killing the workers. The workers are being murdered in broad daylight. They're just getting rid of them because they don't want that aid to come in. At the end of the day, the whole reason for this war, the whole reason it's lasted as long as it has, and the reason that Hamas has not accepted a single ceasefire and they don't want to help their own people is because everything they show as their people needing help, their people needing aid, they're able to benefit from. They're the leaders of Hamas who currently live in Qatar. They're not even dealing with this war at all. They're partying in Qatar right now. Their net worth is $11 billion. Every dollar that comes in as a donation for aid for these poor people is going straight to their pockets. So they're benefiting from this war more than anybody else. They're the only ones benefiting from this war. And that's why they're trying to continue the tragedy. And they know that all that matters is that they get more aid. That's it.
I got you. So just so we dissect this a little further, you have this pier, this dock, whatever being built to bring in more aid, but the people building this particular pier are under constant attack. They're being killed as they're trying to build infrastructure to help the people that live in Gaza. That's exactly what's going on. Additionally, you have the main heads, if you will, of Hamas living out of the country, and they're making bank. They just keep making money because basically what you have in Gaza is a perpetual donor state. You have perpetual refugees there. You have individuals there that will always be needing assistance. It's essentially a place that is used as a sword against Israel.
Right.
Anytime the puppet masters want to have a crisis. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, if they wanted to build the infrastructure, they could build an empire. They have so much money coming in, and we're looking at these refugees that are 4 generations from the people that were there when Israel became a state, and they're still calling them refugees, and they're still collecting money every single month.
And I think that's important for everybody to understand too. The individuals that are in Gaza, these are people that's been there now 4 generations, folks. 4 generations. Now, since we're on the subject, where did originally these people come from? Can you explain that to us?
Absolutely. So before Israel was even a country, was anything, this land, this part of the land was Jordan and Egypt. It was different parts of Jordan and Egypt, and it was kind of uncharted territory as well, that was just owned by the British Mandate. So when the Holocaust happened, after the Holocaust ended, that's when the UN decided that Israel should have the right to have a state in their homeland of Israel, right? So what they did is they first tried to create a two-state solution. They tried to create Palestine as a country and then create Israel. And that's what we see is those borders of Gaza and then Israel as the country, which is a tiny little strip of land. Both of them are. So they tried to create a two-state solution. But the Arabs that were in that area refused to accept that. So when it came down to it, they gave them 6 months to kind of make room, make way, so the Israelis could come in and build, the Jews could come in and build their homes and create their new life. But instead, what happened is that on the day that Israel was created, the following day, in 1948, the following day, the Six-Day War started. And that's when the countries surrounding Israel basically warned the Gazans, told them, hey, you have to get out of your house because we're going to attack and try to get rid of all the Jews, and then you can come back in. So for 6 days, this country that is 1 day old, that had no established military, that had no established defense at all, fought all of those surrounding countries, and they won. And so the people that were told to leave their homes never came back. The people who stayed within Israel, the Muslims and the Arabs that stayed within Israel and didn't participate in this attack, those are people who still live in Israel 4 generations later, that have the same rights as Israelis, that are part of the government in Israel, that, you know, are completely equal citizens. But they were people that chose to be a part of that country instead of shunning it and leaving to try to get rid of them.
I think that's an important point too, is the fact that a lot of people here in America, people I've talked to specifically, they don't understand that Israel is not just Jewish people. There are, although it's a minority, there are Arabs that live there in peace for the most part with their Jewish neighbors. Is that accurate too? I mean, like you said, now when let's just talk about Israel from more of a Christian American perspective, because I think a lot of Americans may not really understand the history of Israel. All right. So you have Israel occupied that same land, because what I hear a lot in the media is, oh, the Arabs were there first in that particular land, but that's not true. No. Israel was there first 2,000-3,000 plus years ago. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So they were persecuted, and that's how there's a term within Judaism called the diaspora, and it basically refers to Jews that are not within their homeland, the homeland being Israel. So for, you know, thousands of years, people that were originally in that land of Judea, which is what Israel used to be called, and that's how Judaism. So those people that were in that land were persecuted for being Jewish and ended up being, you know, shipped off to Europe. And that's how you see all of these people that are in other countries, to Spain, to some of them to China. You know, there's Jews all over the world because they weren't allowed to be there. So my grandmother, for example, she actually is she was considered Palestinian when she was born in the 40s because she's from that land. So some didn't leave. But then you look at my grandfather, who has since passed, but he was her husband. He was from Iraq. And when he was a child, they were persecuting Jews. They didn't have the same rights. None of the Arab countries surrounding gave Jews the same rights. They looked at them as lower. And his family had to leave very abruptly in order to save their lives. And they ended up going to Israel right after Israel became a country. So, you know, everyone's just been spread out.
Now, I don't know if we talked about it since you and I talked earlier, but my understanding is your family in particular, you were living in Iran, and after the Shah fell, some of the viewers here probably remember the Shah of Iran when they had their uprising. I think it was 1979 where the Shah was deposed. At that point, your family, I'm assuming your parents, your grandparents, whatever, they moved to Israel at that time. Is that correct?
Well, they moved from Iraq, but it was the same sort of situation.
I'm sorry, Iraq, but it was that's what we're talking. I want to make sure I understand your story. But at that time, it was a safety issue, essentially, right? The persecution. So your family moved to Israel first. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you, what you were telling me, it was you and your parents moved to America at that time.
So I was born in the US. My parents moved in the 90s. At that
Okay.
point, they just moved to, kind of give us better opportunities, start a life in America. But at that time, so back, in the 40s and everything, or yeah, when Israel was created, all of the Jews within Muslim countries surrounding had no choice but to up and go to Israel because they were starting to persecute Jews at that point more severely. So the Holocaust obviously, stopped just in time, but it was spreading to the Middle East right before World War II ended. So that was already starting. And then Israel was created. So they sent planes to all these different countries and picked up, planes full of Jews, brought them to the homeland. And so that's
Right.
kind of how my family got there. At the same time, my mother's side, her family's from Romania, so they're part of the diaspora Jews that were split up and sent over to that area. They came back for the same reason. They didn't have the same rights. There was a lot of just trouble getting the same opportunities as Jews over there. So they came to the homeland as well. And my mother was also born in Israel.
One of the points that I want to drill down on is the fact that Israel occupied that same land first. Is that
Yes.
your understanding? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
When we look at our Christian Bible, I believe people that practice Judaism call it the Torah, at least the four, I believe it's the four books of the Old Testament. I'm not a religious scholar, but I'm just making sure everybody understands how this flows. Israel, the land of Israel, was promised to the Jews by God himself. He told Abraham that this will be your land for all time.
Right.
Is
Yeah, I mean,
right?
yeah, the Torah refers to Israel multiple times throughout. It's something that's talked about in the Torah, and that's the oldest scroll we have to date. So, I mean, if you just look at that, like that is proof right there. But even when they there's the big mosque that's in Israel was built on top of the first temple. So
Right.
there's archaeological evidence too, besides just the Torah. I mean, there's so much evidence.
Now, when we talk about the first temple, and again, I'm not a historian. I'll probably mess this up, but my understanding is that first temple that you're referring to that was built by King David, right? Or
Yes.
was it his father, King Solomon? I know there was 2 or 3 different temples, but my
Mhm.
point is, the Jews have had claim to this land, rightfully so, for a long time, way before any individuals of Arabian descent ever stepped foot in that region. Is
Yeah,
that correct? Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Okay. Now we hear all the time through the mainstream press something to do with they were there first. And that's just a lie. That's
Yeah.
just a bold faced lie. The Jews have been in that land. Now, I'm not sure exactly when in history the nation of Israel stopped, if you will. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it is the fact that the United Nations reconstituted the area we call Israel today, the nation of Israel, right after World War II, in large part because of the Holocaust. They wanted the Jewish people to rightly so have a land that is theirs. Is that correct? Or talk to me about that.
Yes, I mean, that's pretty much the exact reason. They knew at that point after the Holocaust that Jews needed a place where they were safe to basically the right to self-determination, which is what Zionism is. They have the right to be Jewish without fear of persecution. And it only made sense at that point to basically create that homeland within their original homeland. So with that area being uncharted territory, they basically just cut those borders and then created the state of Israel out of that.
It's kind of amazing. I've always thought of it, and I want to tell my viewers, I never really realized this till I was older in my life. It is truly what I believe to be a modern day miracle of God that you had the nation of Israel that existed, obviously, in the time of Christ, as we read in the Bible. It stopped for whatever reason in history. I'm sure there was some type of conquering at some point. But fast forward roughly 2,000 years later, and the nation of Israel has been reborn
Yeah.
as
Exactly.
God promised. Hell,
Right.
it gets me choked up thinking about it, to be honest with you. I mean, it's truly a modern day miracle. It's almost unbelievable to think it happened, and it's been that large of a gap of
Yeah.
time. It just shows God is faithful to
Mhm.
his promises, and that's That's wonderful. I want to talk again about the individuals that are currently existing in the Gaza Strip. Let's talk about what happened, and you fill in the blanks here. Essentially, when Israel was formed again, the Arabian forces, as you were talking about in the 6 Day War, they basically told the Arabs that were living there, hey, we're coming through with our armies. You had Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, I think Iraq, and what else did I miss there? There was five. Okay, yeah, it was like 5 or 6 nations. They were like, hey, we're coming through with our armies and we're going to slaughter every man, woman, and child. And we want to know the Jews from the Arabs. So to make it easier for us, we want you to pack up and scoot quickly. And they ended up in the Gaza Strip. And then, as you pointed out, rightfully so, the armies never materialized. Israel was able to whoop all those nations in the 6 Day War that we were just discussing. So that's kind of where that right of return comes in that you sometimes hear about. Is that also correct? Okay.
Right.
Where they talk about they want to go back to their homes and stuff like that. But the reality is they left their homes.
Exactly.
And fleeing. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands how this is all laid out. Basically, the individuals that are currently in Gaza, they're Jordanian. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Why do you not think they simply don't take the people that live in Gaza and repatriate them in Jordan?
So some of the refugees did return to Jordan when they told them to leave. They returned to Jordan because in reality, the people who lived in that area at that time were Jordanians and Syrians and everybody in the surrounding areas that was living there for work. They worked there. They kind of created their homes there. So when they told them to leave, not most of them, but a good chunk of them did return back to those countries. So the biggest issue was that in Jordan, as well as in Lebanon, they tried to overthrow the government. And it's a very radicalized group of people that tried to do it, but that was people who are now considered Palestinians. And so they were kicked out, essentially. And so now that this war is happening, people are continuously putting the blame on Israel when if you really think about it, they could easily open the borders to Egypt and all of those surrounding countries, and they could take them back in. But from experience and what happened the last time they did, they refused because they don't want to bring any more trouble within their countries.
Yeah, in reality, they could solve this problem quickly by simply taking all these residents that are considered refugees in Gaza and move them into Egypt or Jordan or split them up between all the different Arabian countries. But the reality is, especially Egypt, they don't want these people because they view them as radical terrorists. So their own people, their own Arabian people, if you will, they don't want these individuals because they know they are bad. What say you?
Yeah, pretty much exactly. And, also another reason that they are refugees is because in those countries, the people that stayed, they have still to this day not been given the same rights that other civilians have. So, if they were to open up those borders and bring them in and give them those same civilian rights, give them citizenship to those countries and return their citizenship, really, I think that this, wouldn't be even something we're talking about right now. So, I think that a lot of the blame does end up falling on those countries as well.
I think something else I want to mention is the fact that the government of Hamas is there is because the people in Gaza elected Hamas, and they continue to elect Hamas. So in that sense, the residents of the Gaza Strip are really not innocent per se, in the sense that they are overwhelmingly supported and reelected. They keep electing the same Hamas officials time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in 1967, before 1967, I would say, they were peacefully coexisting. And then in 1967, there was what's called the Yom Kippur War, where the Gazans attacked again, and a lot of surrounding countries attacked as well. And this was on what's considered the holiest holiday of Judaism. So no one was prepared. It was a complete surprise attack. And after that, you get into the first Intifada, where Gazans were coming into Israel and essentially just performing terrorist acts and causing chaos.
Let me slow you down a bit. What exactly is an intifada, just briefly?
Intifada means violent violent revolution. So basically what it was is them trying to essentially, part two of the 6-Day War, trying to get rid of the Jews.
It's just it's kind of like an uprising, a violent uprising to take out Israel. Okay.
Right. So at that point, when they were, peacefully coexisting, they were coming in, they bombed buses, they stabbed people in the street. There was a lot of violence and chaos. And that is when, essentially 1967, when the occupation started. So that is when Israel said, okay, if you guys can't peacefully coexist, we're going to shut off this border so we can protect our own. And we're going to come over there and settle and make sure people are doing, just keeping them in check. But then, you get to 2005, and at that point, Israel decided, okay, the government at that time decided, okay, let's remove the occupation, let's get people out of Gaza, and they can handle themselves, and we'll just try to create a peaceful solution by leaving those settlements and taking back our settlements back to Israel. And at that point, when they no longer had a government, they weren't part of Israel's government, or Israel wasn't governing them anymore, that's when they elected Hamas. And, every time they keep re-electing Hamas. And personally, I do think there are Palestinians out there that do want peace, that don't support Hamas. But the second that they're, even think about speaking about that, they're instantly murdered. So we don't even know if they exist or where they exist. I mean,
that's a good point.
Yeah, they're not allowed to speak against their government.
Yeah, and on my channel here, I talk a lot about indoctrination. I encourage everybody to think for themselves. Don't believe something because I tell you or anybody tells you. Hear what you need to hear and make up your own mind. Do your own research. Do your own checking of the facts. But in relation to the prospect of peace in the Gaza Strip, is it not the case that they essentially teach the children from a very young age that Jews are bad, you need to kill Jews, and this is ingrained. It's a severe type of indoctrination, and it happens from kindergarten all the way up.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, from the time that they're able to speak, that's what they're telling them. They have, history books from, they have the Mein Kampf, they study that in school, and they have school plays for kindergartners.
And the Mein Kampf, that's a book written by
Hitler.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So they have all of this, Nazi propaganda that they're learning in schools as fact. And, there's videos of kindergarten school plays where they're shooting the Jews and talking about how evil the Jews are. And people, the Palestinians are so radicalized at this point that it just seems normal to them that they're brainwashing these children from the time that they can speak. There's videos also of kids that say like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a martyr and kill the Jews. And their parents are, celebrating that and saying, oh, wow, I'm so proud of my son and this and that. And it's just so deeply ingrained in them that they're immediately like, these are our enemies and we want to kill them, like from the second they can think.
Now, in our remaining time that we have left, I want to talk exclusively about your cousin. That's what we're here for. And I want to make sure everybody, when you see these individuals marching around college, marching around their universities, and they're screaming death to the United States, death to Israel, from the river to the sea, all this nonsense, I want you to be thinking about what has happened to these individuals in Israel, these Jews, if you will, on October 7th, and what they are continuing to do. I mean, is it not the case this could be over with quickly if Hamas decides to release the hostages and lay down their arms? Talk to me about that.
I mean, people all over campuses, all over the U.S. are yelling ceasefire now. But in reality, Israel's proposed multiple ceasefires. And all they're asking for is the hostages back in exchange for, the Palestinian prisoners that are actual terrorists in prisons in Israel. They're trying to do an exchange. And all Hamas has to do is put down.
Let me interject something. There was a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire on October 6th.
Yes, exactly.
And that ceasefire didn't work out, right?
No, it did not. Just like every other ceasefire. I mean, every time there was a ceasefire in place, Hamas broke that ceasefire. So, I just feel like with Israel proposing as many ceasefires as they are and Hamas refusing to accept them, I think that it's a pretty simple situation, if you ask me. I mean, one side wants peace, one side wants a ceasefire, the other side doesn't. And, there's the first Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She has a quote that basically says, if the Muslims put down their weapons, there will be peace. But if the Jews put down their weapons, there will be no more Israel.
Amen. That is exactly right, and that's what people need to know. I've had this conversation with other individuals just from all different types of walks of life, and the reality is, if they acted over there the way they act here, for example, if you're a strong liberated woman, this type of thing, you believe in, this Me Too stuff, and you believe to be, let's say you call yourself a feminist. If you're over in Gaza and you start talking like that, what's going to happen to you?
Immediately dead. There's no room for discussion. I mean, if you go out without your entire head covered, they kill you. Like, there are no rights for women over there. It's
because they practice what, Sharia law, I believe is what it's called, and it basically is, if you're a man, you're king. If you're a woman, you're property. Is that pretty well what it is? And I don't understand why these kids don't understand this. They don't. What was that one sign we were laughing about? It was something to do, queers for Hamas. I saw that.
Yep.
Yeah. If you're gay in Gaza, you die. You die quickly. You die painfully, perhaps.
Yes.
You're burned. They will tie you to a stake and cook you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, these people are savages. These people are evil. They have an evil doctrine. There's nothing peaceful about these individuals that call themselves Hamas. And what do you think is going on with these kids on these campuses? Do you have an opinion as to why they are spewing this nonsense that they're spewing?
I think that the people who are leading these protests have their own agendas. I think they're either completely just anti-Semitic, or they themselves are.
Let me slow you down real quick here, because one of the objectives here is to make sure everybody's educated on this stuff. Anti-Semitic means
hatred towards Jews.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anti mean against, and Semitic is Jewish people, correct? Okay. So anti-Semitic. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue. They're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, they're either anti-Semitic, or they have their own agendas because they have the ties that they do towards these types of, radicalized groups. So those are the people that are leading the protests and are spreading the propaganda and are spreading the misinformation. And the other people that are following are not, they can't think for themselves. They don't know how. And I think that they're just trying to back a cause based on the few snippets they see on TikTok. So, part of it, I would say, is ignorance, and part of it is malice. And I think it's a perfect combination of the two.
I think I agree with you. I think you have a combination of different things going on. I think you have a lot of indoctrination by the so-called professors, educators at these universities. Generally, teachers in general tend to be more liberal. They're not all liberal, but I'm just generally speaking, it attracts people of this type of political persuasion, if you will, and they generally are going to have these type of way off on left field type of views, and then the kids that they're teaching, they simply are not thinking for themselves. They're just hearing this hate, this nonsense coming out of the professors' mouths, and they eat it up just like a student in the Gaza Strip would be eating it up, as far as Jews are bad or whatever nonsense they're being taught. And then you marry that to these individuals, these Soros, these left-leaning nuts that are funding this type of stuff, with the tents and the facilities they need, and these shields that they're making. People have to stop and think, what is going on right now? Today, they are holding terrorists in these caverns. They're holding hostages by these terrorists in these caverns. They're in the Gaza Strip, and they just will not do what needs to be done to bring this matter to a swift conclusion. If Hamas cared about their people, they would stop this, would they not?
Absolutely. I mean, their people are the only ones suffering. They're having the time of their lives. So, I mean, definitely at the end of the day, it comes down to them not caring about their people.
That is so true. They are not suffering. They have everything that they need as far as their wealth. They're all set up. It's going to be the regular people, if you will, that are suffering. I want to share, in the time we have left, this Instagram post that you sent me pertaining to your hit the wrong button there, pertaining to your cousin. And let me see if I can get this to work right here. Let's listen to this and see how this sounds here. All right. And of course, this is here at the top. This is her in captivity. And this is your cousin playing the violin, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tell me, what is it that you want? What is it you want everybody to know about your cousin? Tell us about who she is, what kind of person she is. What is it you want people to know about your cousin?
I mean, at the end of the day, she's a kid. You know, she's 19 years old, just graduated high school, just trying to enjoy her. She's still a teenager, and at the end of the day, you look at those videos and you see the difference between who she was before and who she is now, and the situation that she's in right now, and the utter violence and the abuse that she's suffered just in that video, and God knows what else is going on right now. But she, even the fact that she sent out that message, the one message she sent out is, tell my family not to worry, wish my dad a happy birthday. That should tell you everything you need to know about her. I mean, she's incredibly, just the biggest heart. She's super loving. She is so resilient. And I was speaking with my other cousin today, who was telling me that she heard from the girl that got the messages that she's still practicing Judaism. She's still keeping the Sabbath and doing everything she can to pray every day and try to motivate the other girls there and try to keep them positive. And that's just the type of person she is, always looking on the bright side, always trying to bring other people up. So hopefully she gets out safely, and that's all I can say.
I totally echo that. I can tell that she's the kind of young lady that's thinking of other people, even in her serious time of need. She's sending out a message saying, I'm thinking of you and don't be worried. I'm strong and I'll be okay. And I think that speaks volumes to her, about her character, frankly, her parents. Obviously has raised this young lady correctly. I want to let you know that and I'm sure my viewers and people that will watch this video afterwards, we have a bunch of viewers on X. We have 8-9 people on YouTube right now. We have Facebook, and we have a person even on Twitch. So a lot of people are going to see this video after it starts posting once we're done concluding here. And I think that they're going to have a better understanding of exactly what's going on in this Israel-Gaza crisis. Personally, I'll be praying for you, for your family, for your cousin's safe return. The Bible tells us to pray for the peace of Israel, and I think each and every one of us ought to do that, as I will be doing. So, again, Donna, I appreciate you being with us today. It has been a blessing to talk with you, to learn about your cousin, and as we've discussed before, I would like to have another interview with you soon. And for my viewers, just know that I'm going to stay on top of this, and we're going to bring you whatever developments there may be. So I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to say a closing statement to my viewers. And Donna, I appreciate you being with me and my viewers today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, folks. We need to all realize what's going on. If you have any friends that are indoctrinated, if you know anybody marching around these campuses doing this nonsense, send them this video. Let them know what's truly going on over there in Israel, and what kind of people are leading these individuals in the Gaza Strip. This is really shameful, despicable. It's evil. That's exactly what this is pure evil. And at this time, as a country, as a people, we need to do everything we can to support Israel and lift up this family that's clearly worried and suffering for the safe return of their daughter, their family member, their cousin. And I think each and every one of us should do our parts. Folks, if you're still with me, be sure to hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, share this with these individuals that need to have this shared with them. You know, I appreciate each and every one of you joining me today. I always say, keep your mind free, never give up, my friends. Till next time, I am J.R. Dukes.